It's 8:43 on a Sunday morning. Zara Mensah is sitting at her kitchen table in Toronto, Canada. The coffee is fresh. The apartment is quiet. The window faces east, and the light at this hour is the specific warm gold that makes Sunday mornings feel like they contain possibilities. She is not looking at the light. She is looking at her phone. She has been looking at her phone for 31 minutes. She picked it up to check one thing, a restaurant reservation she'd made the night before. She checked it in 11 seconds. That was 31 minutes ago. Since then, she has watched 4 videos she will not remember by noon. She has scrolled past a post from someone she went to university with, someone she hasn't spoken to in 6 years, and felt briefly but unmistakably a pang of something cold and comparative about the kitchen renovation in the background of the photo. She has read a thread about a geopolitical situation she has no power to influence and felt her nervous system respond as though she were personally threatened. She has liked 3 posts without reading them because the like was automatic before the consideration arrived. And now at 8:43 a.m., the coffee is slightly less warm. The golden light has moved past the optimum angle. And Zara Mensah, 30 years old, graphic designer, Vancouver-born, sharper and more self-aware than most people she knows, is sitting in one of the genuinely good moments of her week and is not, in any meaningful sense, there. She is somewhere else, everywhere else, distributed across feeds and profiles and timelines and comment sections, none of which she chose this morning, and all of which have been running her Sunday since before she was fully awake. She puts the phone down. She looks at the light. It has moved. She does not know yet that what just happened to her has a name, that it has been engineered with billions of dollars of behavioral science and decades of psychological research to happen exactly as it did, that the 31 minutes was not an accident of weak willpower or insufficient discipline. It was the predictable, documented, fully intended result of a system specifically built to take the governing faculty of her mind, her attention, her intentions, her choices, and run it on its own. Instructions before she had a chance to run it on hers. She does not know yet that a philosopher who died in 180 AD had already identified this mechanism and built the precise counter-architecture for it. She is about to find out, and nothing about her Sunday mornings will be the same again. Let's be precise about what the word control means in this context, because it is not a dramatic word, not in this use. It is not saying that social media has hypnotized you. It is not saying you are incapable of agency or that your choices are not yours. It is not the language of conspiracy or victimhood. It is the language of engineering. Social media platforms are not communication tools that became addictive by accident. They are behavioral modification systems that were built deliberately, iteratively, by some of the most talented engineers and psychologists in the world to modify human behavior in specific, measurable, profitable directions. This is not a claim. It is a documented design principle. In 2017, Sean Parker, founding president of Facebook, described the platform's design philosophy in terms that left no ambiguity. The goal was to consume as much of users' time and conscious attention as possible. The explicit question asked during product development, according to Parker, was, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? Not, how do we help you connect with people you care about? Not, how do we make your life better? How do we consume your time and conscious attention? The product is not the platform. The product is your attention, your behavior, your preferences, your anxieties, your comparison responses, your outrage reflexes, packaged, sorted, sold to advertisers who need to understand exactly how to modify your purchasing behavior, political behavior, your sense of what is normal and desirable and worth wanting. You are not the user, you are the inventory. And the system that has been running your Sunday morning for 31 minutes knows more about your behavioral patterns than you do. It knows which content produces the highest engagement from your specific profile. It knows the precise emotional trigger that keeps you scrolling past the point where you intended to stop. It knows, because it has tested this, the exact interval at which to deliver the unpredictable reward that keeps the dopaminergic loop running. This is not an attack on technology. This is a description of a machine that has been operating inside your mind every day for years, and that most people have never examined directly. The Stoics had a word for this situation. They called it servidium, bondage, the specific condition of a mind governed by something other than its own rational direction. And they spent their entire philosophical tradition building the architecture of freedom from it. Zara Mensah had a complicated relationship with her phone that she had been refusing to call complicated for approximately 4 years. As a graphic designer, the platforms were professional tools. Instagram was where her portfolio lived. Pinterest was where client briefs were assembled. Twitter, now something else, always something else, was where the industry conversation happened. The line between professional use and personal use had never been particularly clear, which meant that the line between intentional use and habitual use had never been clear either. She had, at various points, noticed things. She had noticed that her creative ideas, the good ones, the ones that arrived with the particular quality of something genuinely original, came less frequently than they had 5 years ago. She had attributed this to career maturity, to the natural narrowing of creative bandwidth as a professional becomes more specialized. She had noticed that her tolerance for boredom, for the productive generative blankness of a mind with nothing specific to process, had become very low, that she reached for the phone in every gap between activities. In the lift, in the queue, in the 4 minutes between the end of one task and the beginning of another. She had attributed this to personality, to being someone who preferred engagement to stillness. She had noticed that her mood on Sundays, the day she did not have professional justification for the platforms, was frequently shaped, before noon, by things she had seen on the feeds. Other designers' work, which sometimes inspired and sometimes deflated. Other people's weekends, which sometimes made her own feel insufficient. The state of the world, delivered in concentrated, algorithmically selected doses of the most emotionally activating news available. She had attributed this to being an engaged, aware person who cared about things. She had been attributing. For 4 years, she had not been examining. The difference between attributing and examining is the difference between living inside the mechanism and seeing it from the outside. And Zara, sitting at her kitchen table at 8:43 a.m. with the light moving past the window, was not yet outside it. She got there 6 weeks later, through a conversation with a colleague who handed her a book and said, with the kind of directness that good friends earn the right to use, "I think the platform is thinking for you, and I think you know it." The book was a collection of Stoic texts. She read it in 3 evenings. By the 3rd evening, she was angry, not at her colleague, at the machine she had been living inside for 4 years without examining what it was doing. The Stoics were not anti-technology. They were philosophers of freedom, specifically, of the conditions required for a human mind to operate from its own rational direction rather than from external governance. And their diagnosis of the conditions that compromise that freedom is so precise that reading it in the context of social media produces the specific, uncomfortable sensation of finding a document written about your own life in a century that predates your great-great-grandparents. The hegemonicon and its enemies. The Stoics called the rational, directing faculty of the mind the hegemonicon, the commanding element, the seat of genuine agency. The part of you that, when fully operational, chooses what to think about, what to pursue, what to respond to, and what to set aside. When the hegemonicon is governing, you are free. When something else is governing the hegemonicon, when external inputs are setting the direction of your attention, your emotional responses, your desires and aversions, before your rational faculty has had the opportunity to evaluate and choose, you are in what the Stoics called pathos, a condition of being moved by things rather than choosing how to respond to them. The social media feed is a pathos machine. Its entire design is optimized to reach the hegemonicon before the hegemonicon can reach itself. To insert the emotional trigger, the outrage, the comparison, the fear, the desire, before the rational evaluation can ask, did I choose to feel this? Is this response mine, or was it installed? The Stoics would have recognized it immediately. Not the technology, the mechanism. The mechanism is ancient. Rome had its version, the spectacle, the political noise, the social performance, the constant stream of inputs designed to govern the population's attention and emotions in directions that served someone else's interests. Marcus Aurelius called them fantasiae, impressions, and built his entire daily practice around one question applied to every impression before assenting to it. Did I choose this? Or did it arrive and take authority without my permission? That question, applied with the daily deliberate consistency that process requires, is the complete Stoic counter to the social media control mechanism. Not stop using the platforms. Reclaim the hegemonicon before the platform accesses it. Here is exactly how the control operates, not vaguely, specifically, with enough precision that you will recognize each mechanism the next time it runs inside you, and the recognition alone will begin to reduce its authority. Mechanism 1. The variable reward schedule. B.F. Skinner demonstrated in the 1950s that the most compulsive behavioral patterns are produced not by consistent rewards, but by unpredictable ones. The pigeon that receives a food pellet every time it pecks a lever will peck at a moderate rate. The pigeon that receives a pellet unpredictably, sometimes on the 3rd peck, sometimes on the 30th, will peck compulsively, persistently, at rates that consistent reward never produces. Social media feeds are variable reward machines. Sometimes you scroll and find something that produces a genuine positive response. Sometimes you don't. The unpredictability of the reward is not a design flaw. It is the design. The uncertainty keeps the scroll going. The next post might be the one. The next notification might be significant. The next check might reward you. It usually doesn't. But the unpredictability means you cannot confidently stop, because stopping might mean missing the reward that was one more scroll away. The Stoics had the counter for this 2,000 years before Skinner named the mechanism. Epictetus wrote, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." Not, hope the next. Scroll delivers something worth having. Accept that the scroll is not where what you are looking for lives. The variable reward loses its power the moment you stop treating the next input as a potential source of something genuine, because it almost never is. And the Stoic knows this before opening the app. Mechanism 2. Social comparison at industrial scale. Human beings have been comparing themselves to their peers for as long as humans have existed. This is not a social media invention. It is evolutionary, the mechanism by which individuals assess their standing in the group, calibrate their behavior, and identify areas requiring development. In its original context, a tribe of 50 to 150 people, comparing yourself to people you actually knew, in real-time circumstances you could actually observe. The comparison was bounded and useful. Social media removes every bound. The comparison group is now infinite, and it is not a random sample of that infinity. It is the algorithmically curated highlight reel, the most successful, most attractive, most aspirational presentations of the most favorable moments of the most selected lives. You are not comparing yourself to average people. You are comparing yourself to everyone's best moments, simultaneously in a continuous stream, before your morning coffee is finished. Research at the University of Michigan found that passive Facebook use, scrolling without interacting, produced measurable decreases in life satisfaction and moment-to-moment well-being after just 10 minutes, not because the content was negative, because the comparison structure is inherently deflating when the comparison pool is artificially optimized for aspiration. The Stoic counter is autarkia, self-sufficiency, the capacity to assess your own progress against your own standard, rather than against the curated presentations of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Applied to comparison, you have power over your standard, not over the feed selection of what it shows you. The moment you locate your standard internally, in your own honest assessment of your own genuine progress, the comparison engine loses its calibration authority. It becomes noise. Mechanism 3. Outrage as engagement fuel. This is the mechanism most people intellectually understand and most consistently underestimate. Research published in Nature Human Behavior in 2021 demonstrated that moral outrage content, posts expressing anger about perceived injustice or moral violation, receive significantly higher engagement than positive or neutral content. The algorithm detected this pattern early and optimized for it. Because engagement is the metric, and outrage reliably drives engagement. The result, the most emotionally activating, most morally polarizing, most outrage-inducing content in your network is systematically surfaced above the calm, the nuanced, the balanced. Not because the world is more outrageous than it used to be, because outrage is profitable. Your nervous system, which cannot fully distinguish between a threatening post on a screen and a real threat in your environment, responds to algorithmically selected outrage content with genuine cortisol elevation, real stress hormones, real physiological cost, multiplied across hundreds of outrage exposures per week sustained for years. The Stoics had a specific practice for this, epicé, the suspension of judgment, the deliberate withholding of assent to an impression until it has been examined with the full rigor of rational evaluation. Before the outrage response fires, before the cortisol elevates, before the share button is reached for pause, ask, is this impression what it presents itself as? What do I actually know? What is being triggered in me? And did I choose this response, or was it installed by a system that benefits from my activation? The examined impression cannot produce automatic outrage. The automatic outrage requires the unexamined impression. Mechanism 4. Identity capture. This is the deepest and most damaging mechanism, and the most rarely discussed. Social media platforms are, increasingly, the infrastructure through which many people understand and perform their own identity. The profile is not a representation of the self. It becomes, over time, the self's primary reference point, the curated, publicly performed, engagement-validated version of who you are. And the self that is defined by its feed performance is structurally dependent on the feed's continued operation for its own coherence. When the account is performing well, when the posts are liked, the content validated, the identity affirmed by engagement metrics, the self feels stable. When the engagement drops, when the post fails to land, the following stagnates, the algorithm deprioritizes your content. The self feels destabilized, not just disappointed, destabilized. Because the self has been located inside a system it does not own and cannot fully control. The Stoics called this the most fundamental error a human being can make, locating the self outside the boundary of the prohairesis, the faculty of choice, the inner citadel, in territory that is inherently vulnerable to external modification. You cannot be free while your identity depends on the algorithm's assessment of it. Epictetus. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Your follower count lies beyond your control. Your engagement rate lies beyond your control. Your identity does not need to be located there. Mechanism 5. The anxiety of absence. The fear of missing out is not a social media invention, but social media industrialized it. The continuous 24-hour stream of visible activity, people going places, achieving things, having experiences, produces a persistent background anxiety in the person who is not, at this moment, also going, achieving, having. The ambient awareness that life is happening everywhere simultaneously, visible through the feed, while you are here, present, in the ordinary texture of your actual day. This anxiety has a function for the platform. Anxious users check more frequently. More frequent checks produce more data, more ad impressions, more engagement. The anxiety that the feed produces is not a side effect. It is a feature. The Stoic counter is presens vive. Live in the present, the only place where your actual life is actually occurring. The feed is not showing you life. It is showing you life's performance, the documentation of experience rather than experience itself. The person photographing the meal is not eating it with full attention. The person recording the concert is not fully hearing it. The life being lived fully in the present moment produces no content, and it does not need to. Mechanism 6. The personalization trap. The feed does not show you the world. It shows you a version of the world calibrated to maximize your engagement. It shows you more of what you have responded to before, which means it progressively narrows the range of perspectives, opinions, and information you encounter. Not through censorship, through optimization. The feed is a mirror that has been polished to reflect only what makes you react. And the person who lives primarily inside a mirror does not understand the world. They understand a carefully curated version of their own reactions to a carefully curated version of the world. The Stoics called genuine understanding episteme, knowledge that arrives through honest, rigorous engagement with reality as it actually is, not as it has filtered to suit your existing preferences. The personalized feed is the enemy of episteme. It is epistemically comfortable and epistemically useless. These are the 5 Stoic practices that constitute the counter-architecture. Not tips, not hacks. A complete system of mind reclamation. Practice 1. The morning declaration of sovereignty. Before the phone, before the feed. Before the first algorithmically selected impression enters the hegemonicon. State, explicitly and internally, the direction of today's attention. Not a task list. Not productivity goals. One honest answer to one Stoic question. What kind of person am I choosing to be today? The question establishes the hegemonicon's authority before anything else claims it. The phone that is checked before this question is answered has already transferred the governing of your day's internal weather to a system that does not know who you are trying to become and does not care. Ask the question first. Own the direction. Practice 2. The impression audit. Every time you open a social media platform, before the scroll begins, or within the first 30 seconds, before the variable reward mechanism achieves full momentum, ask the Stoic question, what am I choosing right now? And is this choice mine? Not to force an answer, to observe honestly. If you cannot say with clarity and intention what you are choosing and why, if the open was automatic, the reach reflexive, the purpose absent, that is not a judgment, it is a data point. A data point about the frequency with which the hegemonicon is being governed by the machine rather than by you. The audit does not require you to close the app. It requires you to make the choice conscious before proceeding. A conscious choice to scroll is different from an automatic scroll, even if the behavior looks identical. Consciousness is the first act of freedom. Practice 3. The impression examination, epoche in practice. For every piece of content that produces a strong emotional response, the outrage, the envy, the comparison deflation, the anxiety of absence, apply the Stoic examination before the response governs behavior. 4 questions, in sequence. Fast. 1. Is this impression true or has it been selected and optimized to produce this response in me specifically? 2. What would I think about this if I had encountered it in a different context, without the algorithmic framing? 3. Is my response to this mine, or was it installed by a system that benefits from my activation? 4. What action, if any, is genuinely required of me here? Most of the time, the answer to question 4 is none. The post about the geopolitical crisis does not require Zara Mensah's cortisol. It does not become better understood because she felt threatened by it. It does not improve because she felt outrage about it. The appropriate response to most algorithmic outrage content is the Stoic non-response. Observe, examine, choose whether to engage. Do not be moved by what has not been chosen. Practice 4. Identity relocation. This is the practice that addresses mechanism 4, the identity capture, and it is the most demanding on the list because it requires the most fundamental restructuring. The Stoics located identity in prohoresis, in the faculty of choice, in the quality of one's own directed attention and deliberate action, in character, in the consistency of conduct across circumstances where no one is watching and no algorithm is counting the engagement. The daily practice of identity relocation is simple. Once per day, assess yourself against your own standard rather than against the feeds. Not, how did my content perform today? Did I think carefully about what I worked on today? Did I treat the people I encountered with the quality of attention they deserved? Did I produce work that reflects the standard I hold for myself, regardless of how it will be received? These questions cannot be answered by a platform. They can only be answered by you. The self that is assessed by these questions does not need algorithmic validation for its coherence. It is already located somewhere the feed cannot reach. Practice 5. The deliberate fast, Malit applied to social media. Once per week, 24 hours. No social media of any kind. Not as performance. Not as a public announcement of digital detox. Privately, completely, without explanation or documentation. The purpose is not willpower training. The purpose is what the Stoics called melit, the deliberate practice of doing without something the mind has become habituated to. In order to rebuild the clarity about what the thing actually is and what it is actually providing. The person who has not been off social media in 6 months does not know what their own mind feels like without it. They have no baseline. They cannot evaluate the cost because they have never removed the cost to measure it. The 24-hour fast returns the baseline, and almost every person who does this for the first time reports the same 2 things. The first, a period of restlessness in the first 3 to 4 hours. The habitual reach for the phone, finding nothing to retrieve. The mind noticing its own hunger for the variable reward it has been trained to expect. The second, by the evening, a quality of presence in conversations, in their own thoughts, in the texture of the actual day that they had not noticed was missing until it returned. That quality has a name in Stoic philosophy: ataraxia, tranquility. Not the absence of engagement, but the engagement with things as they actually are rather than as the algorithm has framed them. 24 hours returns it. Every time. Here is what the research says, and why it should shift the stakes of this conversation from inconvenience to urgency. The dopaminergic reward system, the brain's mechanism for motivated behavior, learning, and the experience of pleasure, is governed by a neurotransmitter called dopamine, but not in the way most people understand. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It is the anticipation chemical. It is released not in response to reward, but in response to the possibility of reward. In response to the cue that precedes the reward. In response to uncertainty about whether the reward will arrive. This is why Skinner's variable reward schedule produces more compulsive behavior than consistent reward. The dopaminergic system fires most intensely in response to unpredictable reward, in response to the possibility that the next input might be the valuable one. Social media platforms are, in neurological terms, dopamine delivery systems optimized around unpredictable reward. And the brain that has been running this system for 5 years, 10 years, has undergone measurable changes in the structures that govern motivated behavior and emotional regulation. Research published in JAMA Pediatrics in 2023 showed that habitual social media checking, defined as checking social media more than 15 times per day, was associated with increased neural sensitivity in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex to social stimuli. The brain of the habitual checker is more reactive to social information, more easily triggered, more intensely responding, more difficult to settle than the brain of the non-habitual checker. The platform is not just modifying behavior. It is modifying the physical structure of the brain that generates behavior. This is not alarmism. It is the documented, peer-reviewed outcome of sustained exposure to a system specifically engineered to exploit the brain's reward mechanisms. The Stoics prescribed melit, deliberate, regular withdrawal from the stimulating environment, not as deprivation, but as the maintenance of a mind that is not structurally dependent on external stimulation for its basic functioning. The research on neuroplasticity confirms that the brain's reward system can be recalibrated, that the sensitivity that years of variable reward have built can be reduced through the sustained practice of intentional restraint. Not in months, in weeks. 8 to 12 weeks of reduced habitual use, according to multiple studies, produces measurable changes in social media craving responses and in the emotional reactivity associated with feed consumption. The Stoics said, practice. The neuroscientists say 8 to 12 weeks. Same mechanism, same timeline, different vocabulary. Here is the thing that requires saying most directly, and that the platform's defenders are least willing to say. The control social media exercises over your mind is not just a productivity problem. It is not just a well-being problem. It is not just the inconvenience of lost hours or the mild deflation of too many comparison scrolls. It is a sovereignty problem. The mind that is governed, even partly, even intermittently, by a system whose interests are fundamentally misaligned with its own is not a free mind. And the Stoics were unambiguous about what the unfree mind costs, not in abstract terms, in the specific irreplaceable terms of a life. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, confine yourself to the present. The person who's present, whose actual Sunday morning, whose actual kitchen, whose actual window of warm gold light is being consumed by algorithmically delivered inputs from 1,000 different contexts simultaneously is not confined to the present. They are confined to the feed. The feed is not the present. The feed is a constructed environment that has been built to feel more immediate, more important, more emotionally engaging than the actual present, because the actual present does not generate revenue. The actual present, the coffee, the light, the quiet of a morning that has not yet been spoken for, is the only place where the genuinely important things happen. The conversation that changes your understanding of something. The thought that arrives in the space between activities. The creative idea that surfaces when the mind has been allowed to be genuinely still. The relationship that deepens because someone was fully attended to rather than half attended to, while the other eye checked what was happening elsewhere. These things do not happen in the feed. They happen in the present. And the feed, every morning, every afternoon, every idle minute, is competing for the present, winning, frequently, because it was built to win. The question is not whether you use the platforms. The question is who is governing when you do. Zara Mensah did not delete her accounts. She is a graphic designer. The platforms are her industry. This is not the story of someone who found freedom by leaving the digital world. That story exists, but it is not this one. This is the story of someone who learned to be in the platforms without being governed by them. She started with the morning declaration. 3 weeks in, she described it to a friend as the strangest feeling. The sense of having reclaimed the first 10 minutes of her own morning, which had previously belonged, without her having formally ceded them, to the feed. She added the impression audit, not rigorously, as an awareness practice. The question, what am I choosing right now, did not always produce the answer she wanted. Sometimes it revealed that she was on the platform for no reason she had chosen. The revelation was useful regardless. She did the 24-hour fast at the end of the 3rd week. She described the first 3 hours as uncomfortable in a way she had not expected. Not in the sense of difficulty, but in the sense of revelation, the specific discomfort of noticing, for the first time, how often the habitual reach had been functioning as an avoidance mechanism. How many times per day the reflex toward the phone had been a response to something she didn't want to sit with, a thought she wasn't ready to complete, a feeling she hadn't chosen to feel. The platform had been functioning as an escape hatch, not from boredom, from herself. By the evening of the fast, the escape hatch was closed. And what she found on the other side of it, in the actual quiet of a Sunday evening without the feed, was not emptiness. It was presence. Her colleague Maya, the one who had given her the book, sent her a message a month after the fast. Something's different about you lately. Zara thought about how to answer that. I'm here more, she wrote back. That was accurate. She was here, in her kitchen, in her conversations, in her work, which had begun to generate ideas with the specific, unfamiliar quality of something that came from her own mind rather than from the feed's suggestions about what was current and relevant and worth producing. She was here. For the first time in 4 years, Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire in the ancient world. He also had access at every moment to the most comprehensive information environment that world had ever produced. Political intelligence from every province, social performance from every faction, the constant noise of an empire that never stopped generating inputs that could claim the hegemonicon's authority. He wrote meditations in the margins of that environment. not as escape, as reclamation. Every morning, in the private journal that was never meant to be read, he practiced the same thing, the deliberate daily recovery of his own governing faculty from the demands of the system he was living inside. He was not always successful. The journal is full of reminders, repetitions, the same principles returned to because the environment's claims on the hegemonicon were constant, and his vigilance was imperfect. But he practiced every morning before the empire got to him. And what that practice produced, the 19 years of the most examined, most deliberate, most self-governed reign in Roman history, is the permanent record of what a mind looks like when it has refused consistently to be governed by anything other than its own rational direction. That record has survived 2,000 years. The platforms will not survive 2 decades in their current form. But the hegemonicon, the governing faculty, the seat of genuine human freedom, will still be there when the platforms are gone. The question every morning is who is running it. Make sure it is you. Before you close this video, I want you to do one specific thing. Tomorrow morning, before the phone, before the first check, before the feed has a chance to set the direction of the first hour of your day, ask the Stoic question. What kind of person am I choosing to be today? 30 seconds, maybe less. Answer it. Then when you pick up the phone, and you will pick it up, that is not the point. Ask the second question. Is this choice mine? Or is this the machine? You don't have to change what you do with the answer. Just notice the answer. The noticing is the beginning of the hegemonicon reclaiming its authority. The Stoics were not building philosophy for monks or ascetics. They were building it for people who lived inside complex, demanding, constantly stimulating environments, who wanted to function with genuine freedom and genuine agency inside those environments rather than being governed by them. That is exactly the situation you are in. The philosophy still works. The machine is sophisticated. The philosophy is older, and it was built specifically for a mind under siege. Your mind is under siege. Every morning, before you even fully wake up, go reclaim it. If this reached something real, if you recognize the 31 minutes, or the cold pang at someone else's kitchen renovation, or the specific quality of being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, share this with someone who is losing the same battle quietly. Subscribe if you want more, not for the algorithm, for the Sunday mornings. Go get them back.